Hello, my name is Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes and talk to you about some of the things you've been reading, some of the things you've been discussing. As you probably already know, I'm an associate professor here at Troy University, and my background is educational psychology and research. And I'm going to take just a few minutes to talk to you about Ilarus and the three dimensions, sort of very briefly, of learning, and then specifically the social or environmental interaction dimension that you're reading about in the course. So, first thing to realize is that Knut Ilarus, when he talks about learning, he talks about it being a interworking and a interaction of three distinct domains or dimensions, distinct in the sense that we can analyze them and discuss them separately, but indistinct in the sense that they cannot be disentangled in everyday real-world practice. So these three domains you can consider almost to look like a three-legged stool. So here's a three-legged stool. In this case, learning in this metaphor is not the seat. Learning is sitting on the seat. So in this particular picture, to sit on this three-legged stool and rest, that is learning. You've got three legs, you've got the incentive, you've got the content, and you have the interaction, which is social, which is environment. These are three legs. Now, the importance of the three legs is that all three of these are required and present in every single learning situation, learning event. So, therefore, also in every teaching-learning interaction. If you think of it as a three-legged stool and you think about content, which you'll see, Ilarus used to refer to it as the cognitive. But if you think of this being predominantly where Bloom's taxonomy tends to focus, and predominantly where in the workplace particularly, but even in higher ed, most of the teaching, learning, focus and research has been done, if you take off this leg, and you say, now I'm going to sit in this three-legged stool, as you can see, you would not be stable, you would fall over. You really can't sit comfortably on a three-legged stool unless all three legs are there. So if you take that one off, or you take this one off, you're certainly not going to sit on a one-legged stool. Now, I gave you the picture of this stool to give you this sort of metaphor and this idea that unless you address all three of these dimensions, you absolutely cannot facilitate learning. You have to have all three dimensions. Now, Ilarus draws his triangle sort of this way, with content here and incentive here, and then the social down here. He's got two different things. He's got this little thing here is the acquisition line, and then you've got the interaction line. Okay, so down here this can also be considered the environmental dimension. So you've got these three. Now, in this course, and you probably already guessed this from the name of the course and from reading, in this course particularly, we're focusing on the social dimension. So you've had two readings. One of them has been about this sort of overall three dimensions of learning, and the other has been about the interaction dimension of learning, the social, this environmental. Now what I want to do, though, is give you a little bit of a broader base here. In a sense, almost of another triangle put in here. So down here you have the social, okay, but you've got two halves of the social. You've got the social and you've got the societal. There's a significant and meaningful difference between the two of these, although they are related. So again, we have the three dimensions: incentive, which is your emotional, your affective, your volition, your will, all of that here, vital for learning. Different course. And you have content, which is the cognition. Obviously, you can't have these other things without some sort of processing. That's what is indicated by the sort of line between acquisition and incentive. Those two things happen in your head together. But then the two of those converge and coalesce with the social. Right now we're expanding the social into this idea of the social and the societal. So on the societal, let's start on the social. On the social side, we have the everyday interaction perspective. In this online course, there's a social dynamic among those of you who are communicating on the discussion boards. In a physical face-to-face environment, there's an interaction. At work, there's peer pressure. At school, there's peer pressure. There's the social dynamic in your neighborhood, the social dynamic in your circle of friends. The social dynamic at the drive-through window, for that matter. There's these little sort of micro-social moments everywhere we go. Clearly, if you've had any experience in education, which all of you have because of your graduate level course here, you have experienced and seen firsthand the effect that the social has on learning. In the workplace is a really big example of this, and that is where you are told, for instance, in a security world, not to prop a certain door open with a brick, but as soon as your training's over and you go to work and you're on the night shift and you kick the brick out and your colleague has to walk all the way around the outside of the building in subarctic temperatures or in 120-degree temperatures, you generally are taught very, very quickly, socially speaking, that we do not kick the brick out of the door stays propped open. When faced with the policy that you're taught one time and an unenforced policy that everybody at work tells you is not done, most employees follow that social learning. So that's just an example of how the social really absolutely can compete and actually prevail over top of your sort of more of cognitive teaching in a classroom. That's the social. One-on-one, one-on-six, individual sort of interpersonal dynamic. Societal, however, is the more global, macro social element. That has to do with your ethnicity, what country you're raised in, what part of the world, your socioeconomic status, how much money do you have, what type of social role does your family have, your upbringing, your religious faith and your religious community that you grew up in, the sort of culmination of the society. That's that root, societal. The society that you live in. You live in a capitalist society. You live in a socialist society. You live in a communistic society. You're going to have a sort of sphere of influence around you that is going to shape you. And that is the societal. In this course, we're going to look at both. We're going to look at the social in terms of individual learning. You're going to read Bandura. You've already read about Vygotsky and Mead, the sort of interaction of the individual with other people. That's the social. But we're also going to start looking at critical theory as the course moves on, look at questions of power, resources within learning, within education, and that's where we're going to be turning to a more full extent to the societal. There is an interaction, two-headed arrow here, between the societal and the social. Each of those is always acting upon and being acted back upon by the other. What you see here is a very complex set of factors, of dimensions that go into every single bit of human learning. You cannot disentangle them from one another. You cannot remove them from one another. In this course, we are going to parse one of them out and study it. But it must be acknowledged that in the real world, you cannot take this one out in terms of practice. In practice, all three of these are here. The incentive is interacting. The emotion, how you feel, do you feel motivated by the societal or the social? What is your processing capacity, your processing ability? In fact, your cognitive has a lot to do with how you process and interpret these things. These cannot be separated, except for purposes of what we call analysis, to draw it out, to draw focus on one thing. Much like that three-legged stool, if you were a craftsman and you were going to build a three-legged stool, it is possible to take the leg of a stool and to study that leg so that you can learn how to make the leg on a lathe the tool, a lathe, so that you then can make the three-legged stool. So you can study individual pieces, but you can never build a stool without all three of the legs and the seat. The moment you take off part of that, it ceases to be what it is. And the moment you remove one of these pieces or parts from learning, it ceases at that very moment to be learning. And the moment you stop teaching with these in mind is the moment you cease to be teaching. The question I always ask everyone is, if you are teaching a group of students and none of them are learning, are you then actually teaching? For those of you that say, yes, I am teaching, even if they're not learning, then your definition, you need to sort of focus on that and realize that your definition of teaching is completely distinct from learning. And then only means making an effort to convey information, making an effort to facilitate learning, not actually facilitation of learning. So my personal definition is that teaching does not, or rather my concept of teaching is that it does not occur if someone at least is not learning. Now you'll never have everyone learning all at the same time. But for instance, if you're teaching only one person and that one person is not learning from you, then you're not actually teaching. You're talking to them, you're sharing something just like you would any other dialogue, but you are not teaching if they're not learning. And you cannot be teaching if you're not taking these things into consideration and focusing on them. And a learner cannot learn without all of these being applied. So this is the big picture. This is what we're focusing on in this course. And your readings about the social dimension have to do with the social and the societal. Later on, when you read the workplace model, we're going to take the same environmental section and split it out again into two more, but we're going to call it something different than social and societal. We're going to call it community and production. But there's still going to be two social facets of the workplace learning model. So we'll cover that later. Thank you.